Good day, everyone, especially to Dr. Elmira Miras. I am Lindale P. Indiano, and today I am going to discuss about teacher education and research, types of educational research, and the scientific method. Before anything else, let us first define what is research. Maybe other reporters already gave you definitions, but allow me to give another inputs about it. So research in common parlance refers to a reach for knowledge as a scientific and systematic search for pertinent information on a specific topic. In fact, research is an art of scientific investigation. And according to Advanced Learner's Dictionary of Current English, it is a careful investigation or inquiry, especially through search for new facts in any branch of knowledge. So now, let's move on to teacher education and research. Teacher education is an important field for research, since the quality of teacher education has been regularly questioned by governments. Whilst teacher quality is increasingly seen as crucial to improving educational outcomes and pupil achievement. High-quality teaching is now widely acknowledged to be the most important school-level factor influencing student achievement. This in turn has focused attention on the importance of teacher education, from initial training and induction for beginning teachers to ongoing professional development, to help update teachers' knowledge, deepen their understanding, and advance their skills as expert practitioners. Policymakers around the world have approached the task of teacher preparation and professional development in different ways, reflecting their distinctive values, beliefs, and assumptions about the nature of professional knowledge and how and where such learning takes place. Consequently, teacher education researchers need to work together in order to: number one, identify emerging themes in teacher education research. Two, build a distinctive profile for teacher education research. Then share and critique emerging research findings. Develop innovative research methodologies within teacher education, and develop innovative teaching and learning methods within teacher education. So here are the benefits of educational research for teachers. Cultivating a research-based approach to developing your practice provides evidence to effect change in your teaching, your classroom, your school, and beyond. So number one benefit is it can help you find solutions to particular problems arising in your classroom or school. It can underpin professional learning of knowledge, skills, and understanding. Three, it connects you with the sources of information and networks of professional support, clarify purposes, processes, and priorities when introducing change, like for example, to curriculum, to pedagogy, or assessment. It can improve understanding of your professional and policy context, organizationally, locally, and nationally, enabling you to teach and lead more strategically and effectively. And it can develop your agency. It can influence self-efficacy and voice within your own school and more widely within the profession. So each of these can involve investigation using evidence from your own setting, along with wider research evidence. So there are many perspectives about research in teacher education. So let's get the teacher educator's perspective. Read and become familiar with the research related to teachers, teaching, and teacher education as consumers of research. Use own and other research findings in their teaching and supervision. Collect feedback and data from their own practice to evaluate, inform, and improve their own and even their colleagues' practice. Conduct research projects related to education, schools, and teacher education as producers of research. Have capacity to provide academic, teacher education, and supervise thesis. develop as researchers on teacher education through teaching in teacher education, and engage in collaborative design and development of teacher education programs. There are types of educational research, but first, let us know what is educational research. So, education research is a process of solving problems related to education. So, it is careful and critical search for knowledge related to education. It is formal process to correct previous errors, manipulate and control variables, verify and extend theories and generalities, and discover new things with an ultimate objective to advance for the welfare of the society. So, before we go to the types of research, let us know first the characteristics of educational research. So, number one, educational research involves a process which is formal, systematic, and exhaustive. So, the investigator has to proceed very systematically to achieve his objectives. He has to be very careful in making manipulations, applying controls, making analysis of data, testing hypotheses, and making generalization for the advancement of knowledge in the field of education. Number two, educational research investigates theories and skills of education as education is both science and art. Number three, educational research is scientific in the sense that it involves the testing of hypotheses. Four, educational research corrects previous errors and misconceptions and brings new facts into light. It suggests improvements in different areas related to education. Five, it opens new channels for investigation. So, knowledge constructs new knowledge. Constructivism of knowledge is the goal of education research. And it changes the personality of the researcher. So, the researcher develops a scientific outlook. He develops a researcher's lifestyle having positive attitude towards things. He is systematic and objective in approach, free from superstitions, having critical and independent thinking. There are five ways on how people get knowledge or how people know something. It's either number one, through personal experience, tradition, through experts and authorities, through logic, whether it can be deductive or inductive, or number five, through scientific method. So this time, let's now move on to the types of educational research. So there are three types of educational research. One is basic research, two is applied research, and number three is the action research. So for basic research, this is also called pure research or fundamental research. Its aim is to discover the basic truth and thus to establish the principles. Basic research is primarily concerned with the formulation of a theory or a contribution to the existing body of knowledge. Its major aim is to obtain and use the empirical data to formulate, expand, or evaluate thinking. It also represents a rigorous and structured type of analysis. It employs careful sampling procedures in order to extend the findings beyond a group or situation and thus develops theories by discovering proved generalization or principles. So the results of this research are not directly applicable in the field situations, or it has little concern for the application of the findings or social usefulness of the findings. So here are some examples. How does the language acquisition device work on children? How does the human retentive memory work? How do teaching methods affect students' concentration in class? So these examples develop pedagogical theories that explain teaching and learning behaviors in the classroom. Another type of research is the applied research. Applied research is directed towards the immediate, specific, and practical problems. It is performed in relation to actual problem and under the conditions in which they are found in practice. The goal of applied research in terms of adding scientific knowledge acquires only a secondary position. It places importance on a problem here and now. It has most of the characteristics of basic research, but its methodology is not as rigorous as that of basic research. Its findings are to be evaluated in terms of local applicability and not in terms of universal validity. It is mainly intended to improve school practices and to greater teacher effectiveness in practical manner. Most of the problems faced by teachers, policy planners, and administrators are solved through applied researches. For example, you will conduct a study into the way to improve teacher-learner classroom engagement, or a study into the way to improve a school's readiness for its students. And the third type of research is the action research. In action research, emphasis is more on action or practical work than on theory. Here, questions of day-to-day life situations are taken up with a view to improve the practical situations. Thus, action research is similar to applied research in many ways. Applied research involves a large number of samples as compared to the action research. Action research is carried out by teachers, principals or head, masters of education institutions, administrators, supervisors. Action research is restricted to classroom practices. Almost every teacher faces a number of problems in the classroom situations. The problem may be poor English spelling of the students, poor handwriting, the problem of indiscipline, and the problem of slow learner, etc. It is a type of research in the field of education which is undertaken by educational practitioners to understand or solve the problems of the local school and community. That is from Stephen M. Curry. Action research has features. It is informal, it is of flexible type, it deals with some situational problem. Its goal is to bring about improvement in the situation. It does not aim at generalization of any type. Its outcomes are not taken up in a formal way. The problem is very real as it is taken out of some classroom situation. It is self-evaluative, and the use of action research is direct and immediate. Need of educational research. Education today is child-centered. All-round development of the personality of the child is one of the important goals of education. Educational research is needed to solve various problems related to measurement, evaluation, and development of personality of the child. Number two, the meaning we give to education today is more vast and complex. It is a cluster of difficult traits and aggregate to processes based on specific techniques and action with individuals and groups that is organized, planned, controlled, and evaluated. In order to solve the complexity of relationships and processes, a considerable research in education is needed. Number three is education is both science and art. As science, it is based on theories, laws, and principles, and as art, it is an activity and an application which requires skills and training. So, in order to make an effective application of the laws and principles and to provide training in skills and techniques, educational research is needed. Educational research is of much significance to improve the art of teaching to make the students learn effectively. Number four, the advancement that the material world has made has given rise to problems of terrorism, threats, and clashes of the modern world. Education is a process of socialization which can meet the challenge of increasing contradiction and belligerency. A continuous research is needed to solve this complex social problem. Another is educational research affects personality of the researcher. So it teaches him how to solve problems to realize truth. He is not liable to accept the findings of others unless he tests them. It is needed to make education administration efficient and effective. So it helps in the decision making. And educational research is needed for a teacher to improve his teaching methodology, skills, his planning, and to make him up to date in information and knowledge. As much as we give how important educational research is, there is there are also limitations of educational research. One is complexity of subject matter. So educational research deals with individuals. So each individual is unique in the way he grows in his mental, social, and emotional behavior, and in his total personality. The researcher in the field of education has to study the individual in groups and the impact of the behavior of group members on an individual. Another is difficulties to observation. Observation of human behavior is more subjective than the observation of physical or biological phenomena. So the subjectivity on the part of the observer has a direct impact on the interpretation and findings on which he bases his conclusions. Number three, difficulties in replication. So the physicist can find objectively and accurately resistance of a wire in the laboratory. He can report his findings and the experiment can be easily replicated by others. So this is not easily possible in education. Number four, interaction of observer and subjects. So the researcher in the field of education is also a human being. So his presence as an observer in a situation may change the behavior of his subjects. Then, difficulty in control. So the rigid control of experimental conditions is possible in the laboratory of physical or biological sciences. So it is not possible in educational studies. And the last one is the measurement of problems. So the tools used for measurement and data collection in the educational studies are much less valid and reliable than the tools of the natural scientist. This time, let's now move on to the scientific method. So psychologists use the scientific method to conduct their research. The scientific method is a standardized way of making observations, gathering data, forming theories, testing predictions, and interpreting results. So researchers make observations in order to describe and measure behavior. So after observing certain events repeatedly, researchers come up with a theory that explains these observations. So a theory is an explanation that organizes separate pieces of information in a coherent way. Researchers generally develop a theory only after they have collected a lot of evidence and made sure their research results can be reproduced by others. So making research scientific. Psychological research, like research in other fields, must meet certain criteria in order to be considered scientific. So research must be, one, it should be replicable, falsifiable, precise, and parsimonious. So when we say research must be replicable, so when others can repeat it and get the same results. So when psychologists report what they have found through their research, they also describe in detail how they made their discovery. This way, other psychologists can repeat the research to see if they can replicate the finding. So after psychologists do their research and make sure it's replicable, they develop a theory and translate the theory into a precise hypothesis. So a hypothesis is a testable prediction of what will happen given a certain set of conditions. Psychologists test a hypothesis by using a specific research method, such as naturalistic observation. So, a naturalistic observation is like a case study, a survey, or an experiment. So, if the test does not confirm the hypothesis, the psychologist revises or rejects the original theory. So, this is how psychologists do scientific research. Number one, they form hypotheses, then make observations, refine theory, and develop the theory. So, it is a cycle, it goes on and on. So, a good theory must do two things. It must organize many observations in a logical way and allow researchers to come up with clear predictions to check the theory. Research must be falsifiable. A good theory or hypothesis also must be falsifiable, which means that it must be stated in a way that makes it possible to reject it. In other words, we have to be able to prove a theory or hypothesis wrong. Theories and hypotheses need to be falsifiable because all researchers can succumb to the confirmation bias. Researchers who display confirmation bias look for and accept evidence that supports what they want to believe and ignore or reject evidence that refutes their beliefs. For example, some people theorize that the Loch Ness monster not only exists but has become intelligent enough to elude detection by hiding in undiscovered, undetectable underwater caves. So this theory is not falsifiable. Researchers can never find these undiscovered caves or the monster that supposedly hides in them, and they have no way to prove this theory wrong. Research must be precise. By stating hypotheses precisely, psychologists ensure that they can replicate their own and others' research. To make hypotheses more precise, psychologists use operational definitions to define the variables they study. So operational definitions state exactly how a variable will be measured. So for example, a psychologist conducts an experiment to find out whether toddlers are happier in warm weather or cool weather. She needs to have an operational definition of happiness so that she can measure precisely how happy the toddlers are. She might operationally define happiness as the number of smiles per hour. Research must be parsimonious. So the principle of parsimony, also called Occam's razor, maintains that researchers should apply the simplest explanation possible to any set of observations. For instance, psychologists try to explain results by using well-accepted theories instead of elaborate new hypotheses. Parsimony prevents psychologists from inventing and pursuing outlandish theories. So parsimonious means being thrifty or stingy. So a person who values parsimony will apply the thriftiest or most logically economical explanation for a set of phenomena. Like for example, suppose a student consistently falls asleep in her statistics class. She theorizes that before each class, her statistics professor secretly sprays her seat with a nerve gas that makes her very drowsy. So if she has applied the principle of parsimony, she would not have come up with this theory. She can account for his sleepiness with a much simpler and more likely explanation. She finds statistics boring. And that ends my report. I hope you learned something from it. And I will leave you with a quote from Albert Zen Georgie, saying, "Research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought." Thank you, everyone, and God bless.